Zaria Brooks had never imagined that one decision could turn her life upside down in a single afternoon. Stepping into the sleek, imposing headquarters of Hwan Lee, the notorious Mafia boss, she felt a chill crawl up her spine, not from fear but from curiosity. The building itself seemed to hum with unspoken power, its polished floors reflecting a world she'd only glimpsed in whispers and rumors. She clutched her briefcase a little tighter, adjusting the strap of her bag, reminding herself this was just a job. A temporary role. Nothing more. Her heels clicked against the marble floor as she walked through the lobby, each step echoing off the walls lined with minimalist art and security cameras that tracked her every move. She had been warned that Hwan Lee was a man who expected perfection, and that any mistake, even a small one, could cost dearly. Yet, as she approached the glass doors to the inner office, her pulse quickened with something unfamiliar: intrigue. When she entered, she finally saw him. Hwan Lee stood behind a massive mahogany desk, his expression unreadable, sharp eyes scanning her as if weighing her worth in an instant. Silence stretched between them, thick and electric. She swallowed and offered a polite, professional smile. He nodded once, acknowledging her presence, and in that moment, Zaria realized he had already made a decision. She was staying. Their first interaction was brief, a handshake that lasted a heartbeat longer than expected. The warmth of it was unexpected, but she felt a strange comfort in it, a silent message that her presence here might not just be tolerated, it could matter. Little did Zaria know that single handshake would be the start of a journey neither of them could have predicted. A journey that would challenge boundaries, spark unexpected emotions, and change everything she thought she knew about loyalty, power, and perhaps even love. Zaria's first full day in the office was a whirlwind of schedules, documents, and whispers. The other employees eyed her cautiously, as if sizing up the newcomer who had dared to enter Hwan Lee's world. But Zaria kept her head high, moving through the office with precision and poise, proving silently that she belonged. She filed papers, answered calls, and even managed to decipher some of the complex codes embedded in the boss's messages. From across the room, Hwan watched quietly. He had a reputation for seeing things others missed, details, motives, even hidden strengths. And Zaria's confidence, her calm under pressure, did not go unnoticed. There was something in the way she moved, deliberate but unshakable, that intrigued him. He found himself leaning back in his chair, studying her like one would study a puzzle waiting to be solved. Their first direct interaction happened unexpectedly. A misfiled report sent Zaria rushing toward his office, the papers clutched tightly to her chest. She bumped into Hwan near the doorway, startled. "Watch yourself," he said, his tone calm but firm. Her eyes met his, a flicker of embarrassment crossing her face. He extended a hand, not to scold, but to steady her. "It's all right," he added quietly, and then, almost instinctively, he placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. The brief contact lingered a second longer than necessary, a silent acknowledgement of trust and recognition. Zaria blinked, heart fluttering in a way she didn't expect. There was a warmth in that gesture, a subtle message that perhaps this intimidating, meticulous boss wasn't entirely unapproachable. And for the first time, she wondered if her new role might offer more than just professional growth. It might bring a connection she hadn't anticipated, a bond that could stretch beyond the office walls. The office had a rhythm of its own, quiet whispers, the shuffle of papers, the low hum of computers. Zaria noticed quickly that not everyone welcomed her presence. Some colleagues whispered behind her back, testing her patience with snide comments and small challenges, questioning why she, an outsider, had been placed in Hwan Lee's inner circle. Zaria, however, refused to let their words shake her. She focused on her tasks, answering calls and organizing schedules with precision. Yet the tension in the office was palpable, a constant reminder that she was walking into a world where respect had to be earned and loyalty was measured with a sharp eye. Hwan observed from his office, silently approving of her resilience. He had seen many come and go, few lasted longer than a week under the scrutiny of the employees. Zaria's calm response to provocation was impressive, and for the first time he felt a spark of genuine curiosity about her, not just as a secretary, but as a person who could hold her own in his world. Later, a particularly harsh comment from a coworker caused Zaria to stumble momentarily in front of Hwan. Without a word, he walked over and offered a supportive hug, brief but firm, a shield against the judgmental eyes around them. Zaria felt a surge of warmth, a quiet reassurance that she wasn't alone in this environment. For the first time, Zaria realized that Hwan Lee's presence wasn't just intimidating, it was protective. And in that fleeting embrace, a connection began to grow, one rooted in trust and subtle care. The office rivalry remained, But Zaria no longer felt like an outsider. She had an unexpected ally, and that small but meaningful hug had opened the door to something neither of them fully understood yet. It was a Friday evening, and Zaria found herself stepping into a world entirely different from the one she knew. Hwan had insisted she accompany him to a business dinner, a setting both formal and unfamiliar. The restaurant gleamed under dim lighting, its atmosphere polished and intimidating. Zaria's heart raced, a mixture of excitement and nerves twisting inside her. As they entered, the other patrons seemed to shrink away from their presence, whispers rippling like a quiet tide. Zaria felt exposed, acutely aware of the contrast between her modest attire and Hwan's impeccable suit. She struggled to maintain composure, fumbling slightly with her napkin. Hwan noticed immediately. He moved closer as they were seated, offering a subtle side hug as he leaned in to speak quietly. "Relax. You don't need to impress anyone here," he murmured. The gesture was small but grounding, an unspoken reminder that she wasn't facing this world alone. Zaria felt her shoulders loosen, a warmth spreading through her chest. Throughout dinner, Hwan observed her interactions, her polite responses, her quick thinking when a waiter misplaced their order, her quiet charm that didn't demand attention but earned it. He found himself admiring the way she carried herself, noticing details no one else seemed to see. By the time dessert arrived, a light laughter had replaced the tension between them. Their conversation flowed naturally, filled with small confessions and shared smiles. In a fleeting moment when Zaria dropped a fork, Hwan reached across the table, catching her hand in a brief, protective hug-like gesture, leaving both aware of a growing connection. As they left the restaurant, walking side by side, Zaria realized that Hwan Lee was not just a boss to fear or impress. He was someone she could trust, someone whose presence offered comfort in ways she hadn't expected. That evening, the world outside his office seemed less daunting, and her feelings more complicated than she had anticipated. The office was unusually quiet that evening. Most employees had gone home, leaving Zaria and Hwan alone in the glow of desk lamps and computer screens. A sudden crisis in the Mafia's operations had required both of them to stay late. Documents to review, schedules to adjust, and decisions that couldn't wait. The stress hung in the air like a storm, and Zaria felt the weight of it pressing on her shoulders. Hwan, usually composed and commanding, was uncharacteristically focused on the smallest details, guiding her through the tasks with a careful patience that surprised her. She noticed the subtle gestures, the way he offered a reassuring glance, the brief touch on her arm when pointing to a file, the way he adjusted a misplaced paper with precision. It wasn't demanding or overbearing, it was intentional, thoughtful, and strangely comforting. As hours passed, they found themselves laughing at small mistakes, her misreading of a code, his exaggerated sigh at a missing signature. Laughter, rare in this office, felt like a bridge connecting them in a way that had nothing to do with authority or tasks. Then came a moment of genuine relief. A crucial message was sent, a problem finally resolved. Zaria exhaled, shoulders sagging from tension, and Hwan, standing close, stepped forward and wrapped her in a warm, steady hug. It was unspoken, protective, and accepting. No words were needed. Zaria felt an unexpected comfort, a feeling of safety she hadn't realized she craved. In that quiet embrace, both understood something silently. Their connection had begun to grow beyond mere professionalism. Trust, respect, and a budding warmth were weaving between them, subtle but undeniable. The office, once intimidating, now felt a little smaller, and the world outside a little less daunting. For Zaria, the night ended with a flutter of emotions she couldn't yet name. And for Hwan, the evening marked the first moment he realized she wasn't just capable. She was someone worth caring for, someone who might stay longer than the job required. The mansion was quieter than Zaria expected when Hwan invited her to review some private documents. The grand chandeliers cast soft, golden light across the room, and for the first time, Zaria saw a different side of him. One away from the sharp edges of his office and the controlled chaos of the Mafia world. They settled in the library, a space filled with books that smelled of old leather and polished wood. The silence between them was comfortable at first, punctuated only by the soft rustle of papers. Slowly, the conversation shifted, moving from business to personal stories. Hwan shared fragments of his past, the weight of family expectations, the sacrifices he had made, and the loneliness that came with being a man in his position. Zaria, in turn, spoke cautiously about her life, her dreams, her struggles, and the moments that had shaped her. It wasn't confessional in the dramatic sense, but honest in a way that left both feeling closer, connected by mutual understanding. The atmosphere was tender, and Zaria found herself relaxing more than she had in weeks. At one point, a story of Hwan's childhood brought a faint tremor of emotion across his features. Without thinking, Zaria reached out, and he responded with a slow, reassuring hug. It was gentle, protective, a silent exchange of trust. In that embrace, words became unnecessary, and both understood that a fragile bond was forming, one built on understanding, respect, and subtle care. When they finally pulled away, the room seemed warmer, smaller, more intimate than before. Zaria noticed the faintest trace of a smile on Hwan's face, and in it, a quiet acknowledgement. She mattered. For Zaria, the hug lingered in memory, a reminder that connections could form in unexpected ways, even in the midst of a world defined by power, control, and danger. That night, as she walked back to her apartment, Zaria realized her heart was opening in ways she hadn't anticipated, and Hwan's presence had begun to feel like something she couldn't ignore. The office lights flickered late in the evening, shadows stretching across the hallways as Zaria hurried to finish some paperwork. The normally controlled environment felt tense, and she sensed before anyone spoke that something was amiss. A subtle shift in the atmosphere warned her, a presence that didn't belong, a tension she couldn't ignore. Hwan appeared almost silently at her side, his sharp eyes scanning the area. "Stay close," he instructed, his voice low but firm. Zaria nodded, feeling a mix of reassurance and worry. She had grown used to his composed exterior, but tonight, there was an urgency in his tone that made her heart beat faster. A minor threat had surfaced in the Mafia's operations, nothing overtly dangerous, but enough to unsettle the delicate balance of their world. Hwan guided Zaria toward a safe room, keeping a hand lightly but firmly on her back, a protective touch that left no doubt he was watching over her. Zaria's pulse quickened, not from fear alone, but from the intensity of his care. Once inside, Zaria felt a wave of relief wash over her. Hwan pulled her into a strong, comforting hug, steadying both her nerves and his own. It was the kind of hug that spoke of protection, trust, and unspoken affection. A silent reassurance that in this chaotic world she wasn't alone. Zaria leaned into the embrace, letting herself be comforted without guilt or hesitation. When they finally stepped back, both were aware of a new layer to their relationship. The bond between them had shifted subtly but undeniably. What began as professional respect was deepening into something personal, a connection forged in quiet understanding, mutual trust, and small gestures of care. As Zaria returned to her desk, she realized she had begun to rely on Hwan's presence in ways she hadn't anticipated. And Hwan, watching her settle, felt a protective pride that went beyond mere responsibility, a silent acknowledgement that their connection was growing stronger every day. It was a rare afternoon when the office felt empty, and Hwan invited Zaria to his mansion under the guise of organizing some documents. But the quiet atmosphere suggested something more personal, a space away from schedules, rules, and the ever-watchful eyes of the Mafia world. Zaria followed him through the grand hallways, noticing details she had never paid attention to before. Artwork, photographs, and small personal mementos that revealed a softer, more human side of Hwan. For the first time, he wasn't the untouchable boss. He was a man who lived in a world of responsibility but still carried fragments of normalcy, hidden carefully from everyone else. They settled into a cozy study, surrounded by shelves of books and warm lighting. Conversation flowed differently here, slower, easier, more personal. Zaria shared small hopes and fears she had kept private, laughing quietly at memories of clumsy moments in her past. Hwan listened, attentive and encouraging, and in turn he opened up, revealing desires and regrets he had never voiced in the office. A sudden moment of vulnerability, a story about his childhood and a lost opportunity, prompted an instinctive gesture. Hwan reached out, pulling Zaria into a gentle hug. It was warm, steady, and full of unspoken understanding. The kind of hug that comforted without words, letting her know that he trusted her with his private world. Zaria felt a flutter of emotions she didn't yet have words for, a mixture of safety, admiration, and something tender she was just beginning to recognize. When they finally parted, the room felt quieter, more intimate. Zaria realized that her feelings for Hwan were shifting subtly. Trust and respect had grown into something more personal, something meaningful. And Hwan, observing her thoughtful expression, knew their connection had deepened in a way that neither deadlines nor threats could ever diminish. In that moment, the line between professional and personal blurred, and both understood that what they were building together was more than just an alliance. It was the start of something enduring. The days blurred together in a rhythm of work and quiet moments, but for Zaria, something had shifted. She caught herself noticing the small ways Hwan's presence affected her. The way he offered guidance without pressure, the subtle gestures that made her feel safe, and the rare moments when his usually unreadable expression softened in her presence. One afternoon, as they reviewed reports together, she found herself lingering near his desk longer than necessary, hoping for the briefest contact, the slightest reassurance. Hwan, sensing her gaze, glanced up and offered a small, almost imperceptible smile. That small gesture carried weight, and Zaria felt a flutter she couldn't ignore. Later, a miscommunication with a colleague left Zaria frustrated. Hwan approached silently, placing a hand lightly on her back and pulling her into a protective hug. The warmth of the embrace, steady and reassuring, spoke volumes. It was as if in that moment, both silently acknowledged the truth they had been avoiding. This connection was no longer just professional. As she pulled back, their eyes met, and Zaria realized the depth of her feelings. She trusted him, relied on him, and, though she hesitated to admit it, her heart had grown attached. Hwan too understood. He had spent weeks carefully observing her, noting how her presence made the office less rigid, how her laughter softened the tension in his world. He felt a protective pride, a longing for something more than respect or loyalty, a desire for a bond that could last beyond office walls. That evening, as Zaria left for home, the realization lingered between them. Neither needed words to define it. Their connection was clear, undeniable, and quietly powerful. Both understood that the journey they had shared, the trust, the subtle touches, the small acts of care, had built a foundation for something enduring. Zaria walked away, heart full and hesitant, and Hwan remained behind, silently acknowledging that their story was no longer just about work. The city lights shimmered outside the office windows, casting a soft glow over the room where Zaria and Hwan stood. Months of shared challenges, quiet moments, and small gestures had brought them to this point. The tension of their first days felt distant now, replaced by a connection that neither power nor circumstance could erase. Hwan looked at Zaria with a rare openness. Gone was the unreadable mask of the boss. In its place was someone who cared deeply, whose concern for her went beyond responsibility. Zaria met his gaze, feeling the weight of unspoken truths between them. The trust, the admiration, and the gentle affection that had grown quietly, steadily, day by day. Without words, he stepped closer and she instinctively leaned into him. The hug that followed was long and steady, a silent promise of protection, acceptance, and enduring companionship. It carried everything they had experienced together. The late nights, the laughter, the small triumphs, and even the moments of fear. In that embrace, they weren't boss and secretary, they were equals, partners, and something far deeper. When they finally parted, both smiled, hearts light yet full of meaning. Zaria realized that the boundaries she had once feared were gone, replaced by a bond that could weather anything. Hwan, watching her, felt a rare serenity, knowing that this connection was permanent. As they left the office together, side by side, the city felt different, brighter, softer, full of possibility. Their journey had been unexpected, challenging, and yet beautiful. They had found not only trust and loyalty, but a shared future built on understanding, care, and quiet love. And so, against all odds, Zaria and Hwan stepped into that future together, hearts aligned, knowing that whatever came next, they would face it as one.